Where behind lives. The first cold week you feel the road through the tires, like a different kind of bone. It's not pain exactly, more like the rims learn your weight in a new language. I leave before 5 because the streets are honest then, and because nothing that matters wants to see you arrive in daylight. The river's breath hangs low and wet, a film over the warehouse windows. The bakery down on Harlan Street coughs its yeast into the air, faint as a thought you meant to have before sleep, and didn't. I ride the same loop every morning, out the back of my block where the alley dog runs a little circle in the frost to test the ground past the paper plant that doesn't make paper anymore but still keeps a skeleton crew to watch the boilers, and through 2 neighborhoods the realtors won't say out loud. If you live here long enough, the weather becomes your family. You can read what is going to do by the way the chain bites your ring and the way your breath gets stitched into your scarf. The camera goes on out of habit. I don't ride for content, though you'd be forgiven for thinking so. I ride for proof. I've been nudged off my line twice in the same year, and both drivers swore they never saw me, which is older than any story and always true from the teller's point of view. So I wear the little eye on my helmet, and it sees what I can't, and it leaves timestamps like cough drops for later. The mornings like this one, when the corners have a little lace on them and the sky holds off being anything specific, are when the city shows you its resting face. It's not friendly or unfriendly, it's just paused, like it heard your step and doesn't know whether to make room or close. Down at the mill pond, the ducks clucked and puttered, keeping the one black bruise of water open. The municipal sign out by Delaney said the road work at the bridge would proceed pending weather, which we all understand to mean it will proceed as soon as the crews feel like it, which depends on coffee and on who's mad at who. The crosswalk at Greeley and 2nd still chirped, which means the batteries in the controller cabinet had a little life left. When the city dies, it will do it first in chirps. The longer tones will stay on after, thin as insects. I took Greeley because the last of the trucks were pulling from the depot back behind the glass place, and they leave a wake even after they re-gone. Fluorescence inside the loading bay rang like big, slow mosquitoes. A pallet jack squealed and then quieted like it was embarrassed. I hit the first red at Walnut and put a foot down out of courtesy. No sense in teaching a bad habit to yourself when your balance depends on the part of you that thinks you know what you'll be tomorrow. The crosswalk counted down and went to the hand. The camera always catches my breath, little blooms that appear and vanish. The rear light does what a rear light does. It's a pulse that announces you but doesn't promise anything. On the second red at Maple, there was a strange smoothness to the wait. Not shorter or longer, just blank, as if the minute had no teeth. The thermometer behind the pharmacy's fogged glass still told last summer's truth. The river made a sound like hands rubbing together. At home, when I scrub the footage, I like to take the reds as clean frames. A ritual, check that nobody tried anything stupid, that the guy in the pickup who eats breakfast with the truck on, idling for warmth he swears he doesn't feel, didn't swerve into my day by mistake. It's not obsessive, it's maintenance, the same way you listen to the fridge, for the way the compressor ticks off and on, or the way the hot water pipe knocks when the city pressure goes soft. That morning, Walnut looked like it always does in the pre-dawn. The empty bus stop with the permanent advertisement for a phone nobody buys, the trash can that leans, the window ghosting with the reflection of my lamp. Maples in winter are all elbows. There's always something that doesn't belong, but it usually belongs to someone who will collect it later. A glove that will have a partner. An insulated cup whose coffee has gone on without it. But in the clip from Maple, back edge of the frame, at the exact place where the camera's lens begins to stop trying, stood a person. 2 dashed lane marks behind my rear tire, the same gap you learn to feel without measuring. Facing me, their clothes were nothing. Dark jacket, a visor on a helmet, hands down and still. They weren't between me and the pharmacy because I could see that fine, and they weren't behind me because I checked that in the moment with a turn of the head. Habit, like breathing. They were placed in the frame in a way that felt like a word you don't say because your mouth won to make it. There and not there, true and useless. I let the clip run. When the red was short, the person smeared like a bug on glass. When the reds stretched long the way they sometimes do when you're the only one, I could count seams on the gloves. On the next red, they were there again. Same distance, same direction that isn't a direction. My rear light pulsed, and their visor offered nothing back but black. I dragged the scrubber back and forth, the way I used to tune an old radio to pull a voice out of the air. I froze frames. I printed one out on the little office printer that has exactly 5 sheets left in it and will never get a new ream because I won to remember the name for copy paper when I am standing in the store. The print showed nothing but blur where the body should give itself away. Not shadow, not light, the sort of blank you get when you crop something wrong and the wrongness holds. You'll say I was tired. I was. You will say there's always a lag and always artifacts, and the eye the camera has wasn't born with lids and therefore gets dust where it shouldn't tea. I know. I checked the date stamps. I checked the metadata the cheap software thinks is worth delivering. I told myself whatever I needed to tell myself until I could get to bed without playing that clip again. When I woke, the first thing I felt was the small square of my back and the way a glove presses when it's trying to make you level. It wasn't pain. It was pre-weight, like the air getting organized before a push. I stretched, and the stretch made a neat diagonal across my ribs. The handprint on my jersey, 5 pads and a thumb, presented itself in the mirror as if I were a stage with tape marks. The cotton had held its memory overnight. The marks tingled like my skin was trying to learn Braille. Work wasn't work. It was the plant out past the tracks where the city keeps its water moving and its heat in. On paper, my title is operator, which makes me sound like I call something. In practice, I watch gauges and screens, and when something wants a wrench, I pick one that won't round the corners. The old boilers, retired but not gone, make their own weather in the back of the floor, and the man who taught me their names talks to them like the cousins they are. There's a smell at the plant that never leaves your clothes, iron and damp rope, oil that's lost its memory and gone sweet. I logged in and found the first advisory. Signal control anomalies in Sector 7A, reporting required. That's the way we do it here. If something is odd, it isn't an emergency, it's an anomaly. And if we call it that long enough, it becomes part of the place the way the pothole on Franklin has its own address. I wrote observed long dwell times at bridge and hit submit. Though the system we use to submit things is a bucket we drop slips into that says submit on it. The IT guy could be anyone. Maybe the bucket is the IT guy. On my break, I pulled the clips again. I told myself it was just to check whether the bug that looked like a person was some smear in the lens I could scrub off with alcohol. I tilted the helmet in my lap. I cleaned in circles. An operator came in and sat at the far table and ate his square breakfast with the TV on low. I could hear the doors breathe when the big fans spun up. The third clip laid it out. The person was there on every red, at the exact distance. If I came to a stop on a yellow because I am not 20 anymore and I've learned what brakes are for, the person set down 2 dash lines behind. If I stopped early, the person landed where behind would be for early. If I rolled a stale yellow without a foot down, the camera politely noted nothing. Behind, the footage said without saying, wasn't a place, it was a rule. When I turned the helmet camera backward and let it run on the next ride, the rear looked like any road looks in the hour before people decide who they want to be. The forward view still showed the person. Behind is not a direction, said the camera. Behind is a condition you carry. I didn't tell anybody. There's an order to disclosures at the plant and out in the city both. You name it and it dies. You blame it and it becomes your work. There's no advantage to making your fear a memo if it wanted to keep the pumps running or the lights from buzzing in an empty room. I slept worse. Not the kind of worse with nightmares you can hold in the morning, but a thin, brittle sleep that snaps when a truck breaks 3 blocks over, or when the radiator ticks as it opens to the world that lives in the walls. Coffee settled in my stomach like nails. My appetite put up a sign that said, "Back at 2, then forgot to return." The pressure at my back came and went at specific intervals that had nothing to do with clocks. At stairwells before I descended, at the end of a line on a form, at the end of a song on the crackly little radio that works only when you don't ask it to. I tested it. I stopped short at an empty four-way at the edge of the park, and the small pressure dialed in, like the exact weight a careful hand makes before you step over a painted line you've decided is significant. I moved forward and it released. The camera later showed the person set down exactly 2 dashed lines behind the place ID first stopped. If I moved up to the crosswalk and stopped again, they didn't move. It was as though ID stepped out of my shadow and the shadow stayed with the old you, with the you who had meant to stop there forever. On a Wednesday, not that the day matters, except that the laundromat on Covey was open, and the accordion instructor upstairs practiced in neat quarter notes you could count like fence pickets. I waited at the bridge light through 2 full cycles to see if the person would grow bored. Trucks sighed somewhere above the curve. The crosswalk chirped like it was remembering your name slowly. The weight at my back turned exact. The way your hand finds out you have a way your shirt sits that is not there any other time. My chin strap ticked tighter 1 notch the way I always mean to do and forget. Not choking, not even snug. Just precisely what I would have done myself if I were in the mood to parent me. The camera chimed when a bump hit the little G sensor in its belly. "Incident detected," it said in the voice it borrowed from a woman who sounds like someone nobody knows. "Video locked." I rode home as if the road were loose under a tarp, and I knew there were tools beneath it, but not how they were arranged. I showered, and I stood on the mat after, letting the steam teach each hair what it should remember, and then I played the clip. When the light flipped green and I stood to get across the plates before the trucks reached their breath, the figure leaned into the frame until all I had was a visor taking me in, and what it gave me back was my rear light, bright and oval, like an eye that had mistaken its job for a different job. No face, because faces carry you too quickly into fraudulent certainty, a reflection where a head should go. My head should have been there. The camera said so. What there was instead was a black pane I could pour my own light into. The handprint on my jersey lasted until morning. 5 pads, a thumb. When I pressed my hand there, it fit like a glove on a glove. You can argue with timestamps, and with the way digital things invent corners, you can trip over. You can say the human head is a hungry pattern machine. You can say what you like. We all do. It's how we keep from having to move. The city started to narrow in ways that didn't look like narrowing, because that's how it always does. "Due to ongoing infrastructure assessment," said a sign by the bridge, "expect irregular signal performance." Another at the top of division, "Temporary closure ahead. Seek alternate route." Nobody tells you which route is still yours, because if they did, you'd all take it and it would fail at being an alternate and join the crowd. At the plant, there were new keys for old locks and old locks for doors that didn't belong to rooms. A fan in the back came on when nobody flipped it and stayed on with a sound like polite breathing. The little compressor that keeps the hydraulic sweet clicked on and off in a pattern I could have written down and tested but didn't because it felt like testing someone's patience. The operator who ate his square breakfast at the far table started sitting closer to the door, and his eyes were the eyes of someone who knew a schedule deeper than the one they route the buses with. I got small. You do, when every stop is a place someone else has drawn for you, and when the only choice you can make is whether you recognize the hand that helps you balance. My shoulders turned into a coat rack I didn't own. I folded smaller to be warmer. If you had seen me, you wouldn't have called me frightened. You would have said I was tired, which is the wrong way to be right. In the evenings, because it felt important to use my legs in a different way than to push and to stand, I walked the complex. The complex is generous. It will let you imagine it's a place made for people and not for boxes. The snow that had fallen and turned itself into grey language at the edges of the lot made a squeak under my boots, like a complaint I could fix. On level 3, the lights hum just quiet enough that my own head fills the gap with the old songs. That night the hum came and went like it had a bellows. In the stairwell, I stood with my hand on the rail to feel the vibration change, and the rail gave me back a slow heartbeat that didn't belong to me. I told myself the figure was a sulk in the code. I told myself the person was a copy the camera had cut from some other morning. I told myself the visor was a flare, the same way beer goes from honest to cruel. I told myself that if I didn't name it, it would behave like any other kind of weather. The problem with keeping things to yourself is it makes you the whole city. Your private rules creep until they're the rules. And then when the advisory comes down that something is closed or forbidden or under review, you can't tell if it's outside you or within the limits of your skin. A week into the first sighting, which wasn't the first sighting but was the morning I decided to call it that, so the second week could be something, I stopped buying apples. It wasn't because of a rumor. It was because when I cut one open, I found the seed arrangement too neat. And the little star the core makes when you slice it horizontal was perfect in a way that looked like it came off a line. There's only so much machine in a life before you start getting measured by it. I told myself I didn't like apples. Then I told myself I never had. When the water main on Morrow let go, because something always lets go when the cold's been constant, the city issued the boil advisory we've all learned to live under and ignore. The plant ran smooth on less pressure. Steam took new paths. The back rooms fogged their little windows, and your clothes kept the smell of it. Until further notice, said the notice. We appreciate your patience, said the part that no one meant. The laundromat on Covey closed 2 hours early and posted a sign with a smiley face, which is its own language, a dialect we've all learned to accept in place of actual feeling. I kept riding. I took the riverbed road where the silt lies like old flour and the lanes forget their edges in the winter. At each red, the person set down 2 dashes behind. When the red was short, the visor was a smear the way a bird is when you're not ready for it. When the red tuned long, I saw the knit of the glove, a worn place where a bar end might have polished the palm. There was a thickness to the air right at my back just before a green, the way a friend will check your collar when you aren't aware you need it. Sometimes the pressure came at my front door, a square before my steps turned to the left, not to push or to hold, but to arrange. A neatness that wasn't mine but felt like it wanted to be. The 2 cameras agree on the future the way we all do. It yes where you were going, and it gets there before you. The rear camera only knows a past, which is useless if you mean to change anything. It never showed the person, because behind is not history, it is a job. I stopped at the hardware place nobody goes to first, because once upon a time, in an earlier version of the city, it was the only one. The bell over the door offered a sound so pure, it made me want to go back outside and come in again. The old man who keeps the place took my gloved hand without touching it and made me a latch from parts that weren't T-built to be anything together. He's a magician who refuses his own magic and calls it stock. When I asked if he had anything to clean a lens that had picked up a smear that wouldn't admit to smearship, he handed me a cloth cut from a shirt he must have worn when his hair was the color that kids call hair-colored. What you film, he said, belongs to later. You know that? I know, I said. And later, he said, looking at my helmet, belongs to whoever has time to watch it. Outside, a delivery truck took its time lining up with the curb. The driver stepped down and pulled at his belt in a way that said nothing was pressing him that day. He still chose the exact line the designers had painted on the asphalt, the 2 dashes, the place that belonged to someone behind him, whether or not they came to claim it. I brought the cloth home and cleaned the lens. I set the helmet with its little eye on the table and stared at it a while. The way you do with a radio you once thought was haunted until time convinced you it is just cheap. I turned it so the eye faced me and waited for it to blink. When it didn't, I remembered to breathe. The fridge kicked on, and the tick of it as the motor settled into the old hum made such a human sound that I said, "Thank you," like someone had given me a seat on a bus. The following morning, the city said the bridge would be closed at irregular intervals starting tonight. Signal replacement, the sign said, as if teardowns were merely installation's cousin. I ducked out of the plant on my break and watched the crew bring a new cabinet out, a grey box squared like a secret. They worked in the manner of men who forget you're watching, practiced and bored, shoulders set to a height you only get from repetition that's paid for. I saw them open the door into the guts, saw the racks and cards and the configurations that only a paper with a code matters to. They cut the old wires in a neat bundle, and the whole intersection went quiet, the way silence feels in a church when someone coughs. I heard the lights fans still turning in their heads, the way your mind keeps the engine on after the key. The city put up a temporary sign on a mobile trailer. "Cross traffic does not stop," it read. It blinked with its own rhythm that never agreed with the lights. For a few hours, the rule of the place differed depending on which shrine you faced. People rolled forward on old habit, people stopped for nothing much. When two rules argue, you get accidents and then amendments. I went home a way I don't go. A neighborhood I save for summer when the kids draw on the sidewalk and the air does the work of forgiveness. There I saw the person again, but not in the frames. In a different sense. A woman with a stroller waited at a sign. The crosswalk counted. Someone in a car with music turned thin by the cold tapped a finger. Two dashed lines back of the stroller facing it paused a shadow cut from morning. Not a person, not a person. A place held for someone to claim. And the way the air shaped itself over the baby S blanket when the light changed had the exact neatness I've come to expect from forces that will not be named, but nonetheless keep their calendar. I didn't ride the next morning. The cold had made the road glass, and the salt left its tongue on my chain. I walked the distance to the plant in shoes that make you feel like walking is a trade. The figure didn't come up beside me at the corners because I did not stop. I slowed, I gathered, I stepped, but I did not put a foot down in a way that was declarative. There is a difference. My back felt ordinary, the way ordinary feels when you hold it up to the light and look for defects. The world I was a part of that morning was a thing with fewer rules. 2 afternoons later, because there is a limit to how much you cannot ride before you aren't riding anymore, I took the bike out, and the road had the texture of a bad memory. I went to the old rail spur, to the long level where the path beside the tracks runs near the fence, and the fence keeps the yard from being the street's business. At the end of the long straight, there's a gap where a service gate hinges, and if you stop there, you can watch the switching crews throw levers that haven't consented to time. I stopped there and waited on nothing. The wait at my back arrived on schedule, which is to say, it arrived as if the schedule were written into me and not posted anywhere. "I don't want this," I told the fence, out loud. The voice surprised me, not because it was mine, but because it seemed like someone had threaded the words through a machine that measures quality. I pressed a palm to my lower back the way my mother used to when she was tired of the kitchen and there were still hours before dinner. The pressure under my hand made a chord with the pressure the world supplied, and for a second our two musics were the same. Then it let me go, which was worse. I left the helmet on that time because ritual is how you keep the parts of you in agreement. The clip later showed exactly what it always does. 2 dashes back, a person the color of a shadow cut from rubber, visor empty of anything that wasn't me. The scene beforehand, though, had a sound. When I lifted a foot to turn, something near where the gate hinges gave an exhale. It wasn't air and it wasn't animal. It was the friction sound you get when a glove sits on cloth and someone adjusts it a fraction of an inch in a direction that's hard to name. I thought I should get help, but from who? The city does not have an office for metaphysics. The plant has no slot on its job board for feelings. Friends have schedules and families and a distance they keep. The old man at the hardware store would have said, "You've got a ghost?" and then rung me up for a bolt and a washer and sent me home with a bag that would tell me I'd bought a solution if only I knew what the problem was. A priest would call it burden and ask me to participate in a ritual designed to make him feel necessary. The doctor at the clinic with the plastic fern would schedule me for a talk with someone who had a couch. The talker would say, "Tell me about your mornings," and I would, and we would both come to feel that naming the hand at my back would make it less heavy, which it will. And then one morning, when I am waiting at a corner for the lights to agree, I'll feel the same careful pressure and know all that naming did was teach me a better word to shout into the dark. So I did more tests. I don't know what else to call them. On Saturday, I went to the parking structure where everybody fails to remember they've made a promise to a wall. I rode the ramps like a slow water fish, ascended and descended without stopping, except where the arrows told me their little rumor about direction. On level 4, I stopped at the painted stop and put a foot down so square it felt like posture. The pressure came on at my back exactly as it always does, like a friend at a funeral who knows when you'll need your shoulders put back together. The camera showed the figure 2 dashes back of the place I made foot. I adjusted the rules. I stopped halfway to the stop and stood without committing. The pressure didn't come. The figure didn't set. I moved forward without stopping, and then at the far wall I put the foot down, heavy, the way a child does to hear their power. The pressure arrived and landed. The figure set. On Sunday, in the rain the city does when it forgets how to snow, I rolled every yellow I encountered. I let my body be the long sentence I wished it was. Nothing set. Behind me stayed no direction. I felt light the way you do when you've left something heavy somewhere, and you can tell yet whether that makes you lighter or newly borrowed. I also felt like a cheat, and like someone had watched me cheat and would wait me out. 2 weeks from the first frame, I took the loop that goes under the highway, where the pigeons keep their own world going with a spare economy and a great deal of gossip. I stopped because the path jogs, and because a jog is a kind of rule. The pressure came on. The visor took my red light for an eye. The world did its thing, where it makes a space for what it thinks you are going to need. A cup on a shelf, a seat by the window, and then pretends it didn't. When I got home, I opened the old box in the bedroom closet, the one that was meant to go to donation and never did. It was full of soft, unthreatening things. Old jerseys, a scarf, a hat with an embarrassing logo I'll never wear, but can throw away because it was given at a time when giving was a currency I wanted to earn. At the bottom, there was a belt I won't claim to have bought. Someone had left it in the old place, and it came to live with me when people dispersed the way water does after a burst. The belt had the exact notch pattern my chin strap has, the way you tighten to a ritual and then forget you have until you need to remember it again. I lay the belt on the bed and looked at the holes. The third one had a shine from use. The fifth had a notch of wear, though I don't remember ever going that far. The leather smelled like a winter coat you hang on a chair at a party because you mean to leave soon and then don tea. I used the belt to measure something that didn't have a body to measure around. I fit it around the space above my hips and pulled and thought about how you can bind something without meaning to. I thought about how we all have our fittings. If behind is a rule, maybe the rule had a strap. I slept with the belt coiled on the nightstand. In the night, the belt made the sound leather makes when it admits to being animal, a small, living creak. I dreamed of a room full of chairs, all with their backs turned. In the dream, I stood, and when I did, the chairs stood too, because that's the power of furniture. When I woke, the belt had fallen to the floor and my back was warm, where the handprint had been. The warmth felt like someone had stored heat there for me and was letting me have it on a schedule I didn't control. Snow came for real. The first storm always got the salt trucks out late and got the drivers angry with themselves for not believing the forecast they have learned not to believe. The second storm was polite and hit on a Friday after dark, which is the hour that belongs to bad decisions and their apology videos. I rode anyway, because sometimes the only way to keep a promise is to show up for it in the form it gives you. At Pine and 11th, the red took forever because the car sensor was snowblind and the loop in the pavement needed a weight I couldn't provide. I put a foot down and a boot heel makes its own sound there, hollow and sure. The pressure at my back settled in and held. When the green came, it came as if from a faraway place. I pushed through tires that understood none of this and all of it, and the visor in the footage leaned in and accepted my red with its old hungry generosity. We had a freeze that week that sank the pipes where the pipe warmers weren't, and the boil order stayed up with a new date and then another. The laundromat posted a paper that said, "Sorry again." The paper plant boiler gave a cough 2 nights in a row that held a shape. The operator who eats his breakfast moved his chair so he could see the door without turning his head. He started flinching when the little compressor clicked on. If you had asked him why, he would have said something about maintenance cycles or about the trickle of voltage across a board. The truth is, he had learned, one click at a time, that the noise did not belong to this place anymore. It had been reassigned. I didn't tell him about my pressure. There is a dignity in not making your problems be the device somebody else uses to tune their fear. We all carry and are carried. Sometimes you have to let someone be the latter without telling them which they are. 3 weeks, and the city put out a notice that the department would be consolidating assets in the sector south of the bridge. This meant one thing to the person who usually fixes the crosswalk chirp, another to the person who manages the overtime sheet, and something else to me. It meant the rules of behind and in front would get written into one cabinet that the last person with a key would shut, and the second to last would think about opening again and then not. It meant a new tightness at my back when I would step to doorways, the kind that makes you square your shoulders to fit an invisible frame someone else put around you. It meant what it always means: the place you live in remembers you in ways you don't get to choose. On a Monday, I didn't ride to work because there was a training, and you cannot show up soaked to a training and expect anyone to hear you. I went late in the day to calm myself down, the way a dog will walk a fence with no purpose but to register it, and I took the long way. That put me on the industrial fringe, where the road travels parallel to the river and then forgets it does so. There are old warehouses there that have not been torn down because the people who tear things down are behind on their own work. One has a caved roof that looks like a mouth deciding whether to speak. Another has the sort of thick door that makes you think of ships. Between them is a loading dock, half out over the water, the boards grey and slick, the path to it braided with old grass. I pulled up and stopped without thinking, which is the worst way to stop. The pressure at my back arrived like it had been waiting for me to offer. It did not hold, not at first. It adjusted me, a 1/4 inch left, a breath, chin strap, 1 notch. If you've never been set by an unseen hand, you won't know how precise it is, how gentle, how cruel. I felt my shoulders fall into a place that didn't belong to me. I felt my feet square to lines no paint had laid. Then it held. There's a thing about a hold that is not a hold. It teaches you you were free until you move. As long as you agree, you have your range. I did not move. I wouldn't call it choice. I would call it a type of politeness I'm practiced at. I looked at the water. It had a skin on it. It had old shopping carts in it. It had the color of tea from leaves that never grew here. A goose slid by and eyed me like I might have bread. The boards under me made a sound when the wind worked them. The sound was a rhythm, and the rhythm matched the one I had felt through the stair rail at the plant and the one the compressor was failing to keep to. My breath fogged the visor. I wiped it with a glove, and the glove left a streak that looked like a decision. A man came to the edge of the lot with a dog that had more opinions than training. He looked at me. I looked at him. He tugged the dog along, like we are all required to tug the parts of us that still want to smell the world before they agree to leave it. I stood for a long time. The pressure held me longer. When it released, it did so in increments, the way an elevator gives itself back to the floor. I stepped forward, and the dock made a sound that meant this had happened before. I rode home along lines the city had painted for people who could be relied on. That night, I told myself I was done with being good. It's a lie, we both know it, but it gets you through to morning. So I rode the next day like someone who plans to be late on purpose. I didn't put a foot down except at the plant gate because the sensor is ancient and demands a show. Behind did not set. The visor did not fill. On the way home, I made a mistake. The road by the bridge was clogged with the new equipment the department left out like furniture on a lawn. There was a flagged detour, and a man in a jacket the color of lemons late in the season lifted a hand so lazily that I couldn't tell if he meant me or air. I stopped where my body told me to. I put a foot down. The pressure arrived like a polite knock. I swore. The man in the lemon jacket looked up and then looked back down at the air he was drawing lines through with a finger. I felt my strap tighten to the exact notch, and in that moment a thought came to me so clear I had to say it aloud. You belong to this city, I said, to the space that had shaped itself around me, not to me. The space, being space, did not answer, but something did shift, some small release, like a seat in a church settling after someone moves. I pushed off the way you leave a conversation without closing it. I went a different way. The plant had a false alarm that afternoon, one of the ones where a sensor loses count. We all stood looking at the same thing, which is the screens that show the flow made line and color. The line said nothing much. The color said a lot about winter. The alarm wanted to repeat itself because that's what it was built to do. An operator with better years than me silenced it and patted the panel like it was a dog who had barked at the mail. I felt the pressure at my back in the control room. I looked down. My feet had aligned with the tile seams as if I belonged to the floor. I stepped away and put myself back crooked. The last week of the month, the city put up a fence where the loading dock had been. They did it with donations, the wrong size posts, and a roll of chain link that had memories of earlier lives. The fence stopped you from getting to where stopping had come to feel necessary. I went there anyway. The pressure arrived at the new boundary the same way it had at the old place. There's no rule that says you can't obey in absence. The boards no longer spoke under my weight because I no longer touched them. The river did. The river always does. When you get to be doing a thing long enough, it becomes your town. This was my town of 2 dashes behind, of chin strap in the notch, of pressure like a thoughtful palm when I waited at the curb. I could have moved, I suppose. People do. They put other roads under them and congratulate themselves on the way the air feels new. But a rule is a thing that follows because it has nowhere else to be. The night before the notice came down about the reopening of the bridge, temporary, advisory, expect delays, I sat at my kitchen table and decided to make the figure claim something. Make it more than a visor. Make it own a part of me that wouldn't miss me if it lived the rest of its life alone. I dug in the drawer that collects objects whose only job is to be misremembered, and I found the little plastic reflector I'd taken off a new bike in a season when I owned a new bike. I clipped it to the back of my jersey in a place nobody would see because that is the only way to keep an offering honest. At the 5-way, where the road used to be an argument between a factory and a neighborhood that won T-give and is now a place where nothing needs to be, I stopped and I waited. The pressure settled in. I could feel the shape of my shoulder blades under my own shirt, which is intimate in a way that's easier than touch. A bus went nowhere. A man with a broom swept the same stripe of his step 3 times. because the fourth would have made him done, and done is a country you don't want to visit alone. "Take it," I said, into the space. When the green came, I pushed off. The clip later showed the visor fill the frame and offer back my red. The next frame showed the figure straightening and their shoulder lifting as if weight had shifted. The clip after that, at the next red, showed nothing where the small plastic reflector had been on my jersey because it had not been there. If a camera can hesitate, it did. 2 dashes behind there was a glint that might have been a drop of wet, or might have been a cheap piece of something catching the light because it had been invited to. The hand at my back was gentler the next morning, or maybe I had become its shape. The city made new lines where old ones had failed to tell us who we were. No parking this side during snow, no left turn. 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., yield to concept, slow for planned events, the rules layered like paint. You could smell the new ones for a while until the old air took them in. Then you were left with lines and a lot of trust. I think I could have lived in the space that set me forever. You can get used to anything. There were days I went without stopping, the long roll, the way a person with money pays for everything in cash just to feel coins again. There were days I stopped on purpose and let the pressure practice itself on me because it belonged to a grammar that at least had a subject. There were days I put both feet down, which is a declaration in any language. There's only one way this story ends, and we both know it. You've known it since you felt the first press at your own back reading this. A rule wants a conclusion. If the world keeps a place for you, the world one day insists you fill it. The day it happened, there was no dramatic light, no tunes from the radio that would frame the event, so later you could say, this song was playing. There was not even a witness who would misremember for me. There was a Tuesday, which is the day the city uses to get things done nobody complains about. There was a bridge light that has known me as long as anyone has. There was the weight at my back, with the exact patience it always has. There were trucks whose exhalations are the only proof of labor I still trust. There was the crosswalk chirp that will never give up talking. There was the green. There was the visor at arm S length, offering my red eye back to me in a calculus I still can't do. I don't remember a shove. I don't remember pain. I remember the sensation of being put somewhere. That deep indoor feeling you get when someone sets a glass in a cupboard that fits, an economy of space and intention. I remember thinking that the figure had been patient, and that patience is the cruelest shape time makes. I fell or I stepped. The difference matters to courts and to insurance and to people who keep score, but not to me. The bike continued down the line it believes in. I went where behind goes when the person who's behind it used to be stops making new stops to mark. I went 2 dashed lines back of somebody I am not. If you're asking me now where I live at Reds. I live where the lane marks agree and then forget what they agreed to. I live in the visor the camera offers last. I live in the exact neatness the hand makes at the small of your back, keeping your shoulders balanced and your weight centered. I live in the rule that does not know me and does not need to. If you ride before dawn to keep honest work from seeing you with all your thoughts on, the camera will remember for you. It will make clean frames of your breath and your rear light and your good foot down. If you stop early to show you can make your own space in the world, I will set behind you and face you at the exact distance the dashes measure. If you roll a yellow and never declare, I will not appear. I am not a person, not now. I am a job. I do it as well as I am able. I do it with the same restrained care I once admired in the men who worked in the plant. I do it without complaint, because complaints are for things you wish to keep and change. I am not keeping, I am not changing. I am the shape of what you needed other people to be for you when you were teaching your balance to believe you. When you wait too long through a cycle and you feel something square you, it is me. I do not push, I do not hold. I arrange. I am a gloved palm, a cord with the world. I am 5 pads and a thumb set on the small square the spine knows. I am the quiet approval your body took on the day your mother checked your collar as you left. And you said, "I am fine." And she said nothing because she had already made you so. Do not look for a face. A face would comfort you into thinking this was about me. The visor offers you what you already have. The light is your own. When you go, if you go, you will think you have been stolen, but that is the lie tools tell when you use them beyond the hour they were made to serve. You will simply become the distance the world keeps open out of a courtesy it no longer knows how to phrase. Some nights very late when the city is resetting itself and the compressors have found a new beat and the crosswalks are rehearsing their beeps like a choir high in a balcony, a man with a lunch pail passes the bridge on foot and pauses as if he has felt something pass through him in the shape of his own name. He adjusts his hat. He looks at the water. He looks both ways because rules are a habit and not a philosophy. He goes on. The camera chimes. Incident detected. Video locked. In the frames, a cyclist waits, front wheel a whisper past the line, breath a small prayer. 2 dashes back exactly. A dark figure stands where behind belongs to them. When the green comes, the figure leans so they can offer back an eye that is not an eye but red anyway. On the jersey you cannot see the hand, and on the jersey he will wear tomorrow you can. The city will keep opening and closing in the ways it does. The plant will buzz in its old unsteady key. The laundromat will close early for reasons nobody will argue with. Notices will go up on mobile signs and then yellow under wind. The word anomaly will lose its corners and become a season. Children will press the crosswalk button, though it does not work. The permission is in their faces as they do it. The pleasant lie all signals tell. Trucks will exhale and correct their course and pass. The river will go under in a way that sounds like someone thinking. The rule will keep room for you. If you never stop for the rest of your life, I will never set. You can roll long and never declare. I will let you be new. But one day, because you are not a rule, you will make a foot down, you mean, and you will feel a weight like the past suggesting itself, and you will be squared, and you will be better for it until you are not. Then you will learn what I did, that there is a family of hands in this city. We hold each other straight. We place ourselves where others can depend on the placement. We are patient, we are polite, we are not kind. We do not ask your consent because consent is a conversation, and we do not confess to knowing language. We know arrangement, we know behind. We do not believe in a head. A head belongs to you. When you see me at the edge of your recording, the smear on short red, the clarity on long, know that I was an operator once, or a mechanic, or a man with a room that smelled like rope and oil. Know that I believed in schedules because they offered me a way to have a self. Know that I ate at the far table and sat closer to the door when alarms learned a music I couldn't recognize. Know that I wiped my visor with a glove that kept a worn place where the bar end polished it. Know that I once knew the name my mother used when she meant me to hear her. Know that I could be any of that no longer and still remain the rule that sets you square, that keeps you upright, that tightens your strap. The notch you always wished you'd remembered that hands you your balance and invites you to push. Stop early or stop late. Stop where you mean to or stop where the city picks for you. The distance does not vary. It does not bargain. If you bring an offering, we accept it. And if you bring nothing, we accept that too. Our wages are exacted in the shape of your obedience, which you will believe you invented. The last thing I will tell you is the only thing I have left that is mine. On mornings when the frost is the thin, brittle kind, and the river has its old tea color, and the lamppost at Greeley winks because it never knew how to be stable. In winter, I feel the urge to ride again. Not the ride that put me here, the other one. The long roll with no declarations. The camera would have nothing to do. The world would resist organizing me. The hand would have no reason to practice its care. On those mornings when the crosswalk chirps and the fan in the old signal cabinet turns without turning anything, when the little compressor clicks in the plant and sticks to the cycle that belongs to the plant and not to the air, I think I could let you make your own timing for a whole day. I think I could stand a block away from you at a light and not even be the idea you adjust your collar to. I do not. I set. I am behind. I am exactly where the dashes tell me to be. I face you. I have no face. Your red will be ready when you look for it. My hand, 5 pads and a thumb, will be patient with the small square where your balance lives. I will tighten what you would have tightened. When the light gives you its green, I will lean, and I will let you see your own light in the place where a head should be. And then I will straighten, and we will do this again at the next corner, and the next, until you teach me the new rule that will be my last. And when you join me, if you do, there will be no change in the traffic at all. The city will still mean what it has always meant. The compressors will still click. The crosswalk will still chirp, the trucks will still exhale, nothing will break. It will simply be arranged. If this story lands with you, please like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who enjoys quiet, literary horror. Comments are open. Tell me your favorite image or line.